Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are back in War Thunder, and before we get into today's topic, which is the Tribal Class Destroyers, which has a nice little article written about it on the War Thunder website, please go check it out. I'm first of all going to ask for resources. The ships in general in World War II is generally my least knowledgeable part of it. I know a lot about tanks, a lot about aircraft, a lot about the general soldiers' day-to-day lives. I've read a lot of memoirs about certain things in World War II, whereas when it comes to ships, my knowledge is definitely lacking compared to the other areas. So, if you think you know any books or videos or documentaries or films or anything like that you believe would help expand someone's knowledge on even just a very specific part of ship combat in World War II, please let me know, just so I can go and read up about it. It will definitely help me. Well, anyway, back to the topic of the video. Tribal class destroyers have been announced in War Thunder. This is obviously one of the steps that the Gaijin team talked about in their last post about ships, that they were looking at bringing in bigger ships. So what is a tribal class destroyer? Well, what I can find out about it, basically it seems to be an incredibly fast destroyer which put its focus much more on large, powerful guns than torpedoes. So instead of being just focused on ship combat, it also had multi-role abilities in different ways where it could take out other stuff as well, since a torpedo is very good against ships, whereas if you have more guns, then they're going to generally be better at taking out other stuff as well. It also had depth charges, so it could deal with submarines, and it seems to have been basically used as kind of an escort, if I'm reading it right. I might be completely wrong. The Tribal Class Destroyer was also designed by many British builders, and it was going to be used by the Commonwealth. This includes the Royal Navy of the UK, the Royal Canadian Navy of Canada, and the Royal Australian Navy of Australia. And they were used by every single nation, even though a ton of them were not made. 31 planned, 27 completed, 14 lost, 12 scrapped, and of course 1 preserved. And the one that is preserved, as long as I'm getting this right, I believe it is the HMCS Hyder. So that would be the Royal Canadian Navy Hyder, which is somewhere. It's a museum ship, so there you go. That's where it is. You can go and see it in Hamilton, Ontario, I believe, if you're out there. But anyway, let's see what these things are going to look like in War Thunder. So let's go and do a little bit of reading. Right at the start of the naval battle's development in War Thunder, we never excluded the possibility of the introduction of bigger ships. Now we bring you destroyers. The workhorses of fleets across the globe were often massively produced. These ships performed a great variety of tasks and battled with their opponents in various situations. These are the fastest of the bigger vessels in the naval fleet, with their maximum speed of up to 35 to 40 knots, 75 kilometers an hour. Having powerful armament, they however lack the armor of cruisers or battleships. We believe that these characteristics will make it possible for these craft to take part in combined battles. Alright then. Along with aircraft and Mosquito fleet vessels, and that's what we want to test in the upcoming test sessions. Right, so, okay, that is kind of interesting. So we have an incredibly fast ship here. This is a large ship which is able to go 75 kilometers an hour. As I said, please check out the news article that is on the Tribal Class Destroyer, because it has a wonderful video with this. I will show it in the video, but for higher quality, definitely go to the news article. So this is what is seen as one of their biggest ships. Now, I can see them going bigger with looking at, as they said, cruisers and battleships, but I believe this is a great middleman to have at the time being, not just to satisfy the community's thirst for larger ships, but to see even how something like this is going to act with the PT boats and the little Mosquito naval armies that they were talking about. Combined battles. Now, by combined battles, I'm guessing what they mean is air and ship right now. Because there is nothing, as I said, and I've said many times, there is nothing that ground vehicles can do against these things. This is a massive ship, okay? We're going to go and have a look at an example of one of these. This is the HMCS Athabaskan, or Athabaskan, maybe? I'm not exactly sure. This was another Canadian Navy destroyer, and its armament was 6 4.7-inch LAQF guns. So basically 6 of them in packs of 2, there was 3 sets, and then it had 2 4-inch HA guns, and then 4 2-pounder AA guns, 12 20mm AA guns, 4 21-inch torpedo tubes, and 1 depth charge rack with 2 depth charge throws. So very similar to something that they are talking about putting into game. Maybe a bit more upgunned, but we'll get into that in a bit. So this thing, when it comes to ground forces, this will have 6 4.7-inch guns and 2 4-inch guns, which will be able to blast tanks, which will be able to put big craters in the battlefield when it comes to tanks, and the tanks can't do anything against them. Maybe we're going to have to see an introduction of some kind of upgrade or modification that the tanks are going to get to somehow be able to send off some AI planes to attack these ships, because in combined battles, I'm guessing they are just talking about combining with the Mosquito fleets and the aircraft like they said, but still, you need to consider ground vehicles here. It is something that you have to look at and have to think about. Moving on. A bit of history for you. In 1934, the British Royal Navy was aware of the urgent need to develop new destroyers that were heavier and more powerful than the top vessels of the time, the First Class, which already lagged behind the newer ships of Britain's potential enemies. The new destroyers were initially designed as flotilla leaders, maximizing their standard displacement up to 1,850 tons. Tribal-class destroyers could achieve a respectable speed of 36 knots or 67 kilometers an hour, and had a fuel capacity that gave them a maximum range of 6,600 miles at 15 knots. The crews on the new destroyers varied depending on military necessity and ranged from 190 to 300 men at various stages during the Second World War. So this is a large step up from what we've seen before in War Thunder when it comes to ships. 300 men compared to 30 or 40 that we may see on certain ships in game, or even just 10 on other ships. This is a huge step up. So even though this is not one of the largest ships that we may see, it is a huge step up compared to what we have seen before. It is a bit slower than the 75 kilometers an hour that they touted at 67 kilometers an hour, but that should be enough to have a bit of fun with it, to be able to toss it around and see what's going on. It should be actually quite maneuverable, even though it's a large ship. Armor is definitely an issue on it, as they talked about before. This basically means that it's going to be interesting to see those rapid-fire guns such as 20 mils, 30 mils, even the big 88s, see how much damage they actually do to this thing if they end up hitting it. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. Now, it's quite funny when they talk about behind the news ships of Britain's potential enemies. What they're generally talking about there is nations like France. Not exactly Germany, since they had the Versailles Treaty and didn't really focus on building up their naval might. So a lot of British designs, or a lot of British thinking when it came from looking at ships pre-World War II, was actually aimed at France, because they were basically looking at what France had. Now, even though They were technically allies. I mean, you know, they're still technically a potential enemy. It's kind of a nice little wordplay that Gaijin's doing. Moving on, the artillery armament on the new vessels consisted of 8 120mm guns in 4 twin mountings, 2 towards the bow and 2 towards the stern of the vessel. The anti-aircraft armament comprised of 1 quadruple 40mm gun mounting nicknamed the Pom-Pom, and 2 quadruple mountings with large caliber machine guns. Torpedo weaponry was sacrificed in favor of artillery power and was unusually meager. A single 21-inch 533mm quadruple torpedo tube, capable of only 1 full salvo. Nevertheless, the reduced torpedo armament was not mirrored in the vessel's anti-submarine capabilities. In addition to an anti-submarine sonar, all Tribal-class destroyers carried 20 depth charges that could be dropped from a special rack or thrown from mine launchers. So 8 120 guns. Now you've got to remember, this is the specification that they're going on from 1934. The HMCS Haida, which is the one which you can actually go and see, was ordered in 1940. So when we look at the armament which was on it, it's quite different to what they are using, which is a very basic first idea of what they wanted on these destroyers. Same with the HMCS Athabas. My god, some of these words, especially the Canadian ships, I've been looking at a lot of Canadian ships and they have some ridiculous names which are hard to say. But the Athabaskan, or whatever, maybe it's just my accent. So you may have a look at a lot of these destroyers when it comes to these tribal classes and go, hey, the armaments that Gaijin are talking about do not match up with any of these ships that you're looking at. But you've got to remember that what I think Gaijin is doing is they're going for a much more general idea of what, or an ideal of what the ship was going to be like, instead of basing it off a certain ship. And the reason they're doing this is so they can fudge the weaponry, is so they can, well, not fudge it, fudge is the wrong word, but change it so it fits what they require. If it has too much anti-aircraft armament, they can take some of it off, they can get rid of it. If it has a few too many guns, they can get rid of them. Maybe the guns' calibers are a bit too big, so they decide to get rid of them. Yeah, it's basically, instead of basically naming a ship and saying this is the guns that it had, and you know, people can fact check it and go, oh, well, I'm not sure about that, you know, those at this time it had these guns and this time it had these guns. Instead of doing that, it's much more easy just to label it as a tribal class destroyer and then go from there and talk about the variations. So even though it says this the artillery armament on the new vessels consisted of 8 120mm guns in 4 twin mountings, well, the 2 examples of tribal class destroyers that I gave you don't have that. They have something a hell of a lot more powerful than just 8 120mm. So just take that into account. When what you see here may not be exactly what you get in game, and if you do get this in game, then it is a definite showing to me that they are completely fine with kind of using some blanket names and changing the ships to suit what they want to do. And I can kind of understand why they would want to do that. One of the big issues I'm going to have, and will always have until it is addressed or I see it in game, is how aircraft are going to get anywhere near these ships. Absolutely anywhere. Even when I look at the HMCS Haida, which is the one, as I said, that you can see in Ontario, this thing has one quadruple mount 40mm pounder gun, so that's 4 40mm, 6 20mm, and then when it was a DDE in 215, 1952 to 1963, it had 4 40mm Bofors, and yeah. So I still don't understand how anyone is going to get near something that has 4 40mm Bofors. even just that if it's mounted on the top of it. So this thing will have one quadruple 40mm gun, which is shown very nicely, and it'll have two quadruple mountings with large caliber machine guns. So that is 8 machine guns, probably 50s or 7.63s, depending on when they what year they want to do this in. And then it's going to have 4 40mm. Well, we already know what 2 20mm can do to a plane. This isn't even taking into account the fact that the plane will generally have to go a lot slower than it is, and it will have to go in a straight line to try and hit the ships. They'll also be very predictable when it comes in to try and attack you. If it's bombing you, then I think the ship may have a few issues, but if you are torpedoing it, then yes, the ship is going to tear you limb from limb with those 12 guns on it. It is kind of interesting seeing that it does not have a lot of torpedo bays. Some of them that I have read about, even though it does say, as I said, about, you know, they focused on guns over torpedoes, some of them still had quite a lot of torpedoes, or at least they had torpedo capabilities when you had 4 of these torpedoes tubes, which is found on the Haida. It seems like they're going much more down a safer route of being able to limit the amount of torpedoes instead of just being able to fire them over and over and over again. It's going to be kind of interesting how it works in the game. Are you going to have a limited amount of them, or are you going to just be able to resupply them automatically? Maybe if you have capture points, you're able to sit on them, gain ammunition back, very similar to stuff like tanks in that regard. Since tanks don't have an airfield, neither do ships. Maybe you have a port on each map, who knows. So we'll have to see with this thing. I think it's a step in a direction that the community really wanted, so therefore it's good to see what Gaijin are going to do with it. The model looks absolutely beautiful. One thing I noticed over the last few weeks or so is during some of these small updates, they've actually been updating a lot of ship models in game, so I'm definitely going to have a look at them to see if we can get any inkling on what they're looking for. The heavy cruisers were changed, the carriers were changed, and some of the battleships. So I'm going to go have a look. Generally, when Ground Forces was being rolled out, what I did was I looked at a lot of the ground vehicle AI on the ground, and they were normally slightly worse copies than what was about to come in game. It was as if they were trying to test them or something, so I'm guessing the same is going to be with ships. So I'm going to have to find out what other nations are going to do to combat these British, or Commonwealth I should say, Commonwealth destroyers. I'm sure every nation will have something apart from Russians, and they will get something ridiculous. Welcome to the world we live in. But anyway, yep, go check out the news article. It's very interesting to read, and go and look up the ships, because the ships are obviously slightly different in every different way compared to the way that Gaijin has labeled them, because that was generally what they wanted to do, and then the ships turned out to be something completely different. But anyway, I hope you all have a lovely day, and well, as I said, if you have any books or anything that I should read, or any videos or anything, please let me know in the comments, just so I can get a bit more of a handling on all these ships, because there seems to be a lot of different ones, and I'm getting incredibly confused incredibly fast. I'll catch you next time.